You know, one of the things I see on a Sunday morning that some of y'all don't is Randy coming in early and sitting down here and taking time to pick out songs and to study and to try and figure them out. And Randy will be the first to admit that he's not a song leader. He made a comment this morning that church services would be so much better if we had a song leader. And I disagree. I think Randy does a fantastic job of using the abilities that he's been given, and I think he pours his heart and soul into it every week. So I am thankful for each and every week that Randy leads singing for us. We are going to be in 2 Kings chapter 4 today. That's where we're going to spend the majority of our time. We're not going to move around a whole lot. So if you would, open your Bibles there and let's talk about life in a dead world. You know, it's a story that most of us probably have not read in a while. I don't spend a ton of time in 2 Kings. I know that Richard read this one not that long ago because when he was baptized, he determined that he was going to read the Bible from front to back, and he did. Which means that he did what a lot of us have not done. You know, so many people start off January 1st. That's going to be their goal, to read the Bible cover to cover, and if they are diligent, somewhere around Leviticus or Numbers, it normally falls apart. Because it's not easy reading. But there are some fantastic stories and some stories that I want to spend a little bit of time in. But before I go any further, Miss Francis, how are you doing? You doing okay?
I'm doing okay. Can't hear. My hearing went out a while ago. I'm sorry.
No, you're okay. You're okay. Well, it's good to have you here. It's good to have you back this morning. Life in a dead world. It sounds like an odd subject. It sounds like an odd title, maybe. Because you look around, there is so much beauty. There's so much growth. There is so much still alive in the world today. But it is a world that so often is a culture of death. Life in and of itself is devalued. It is only what you can get out of it. It's what you can take in the moment. It is a life where innocent babies are killed all the time. Innocent lives as adults are taken. And I say innocent, you know what I mean. Where sin enters in, innocence is gone. But there are so many people that it seems like are being killed for no reason whatsoever around the world. So many people's lives have no real purpose. They look around and there's no fullness in what they're doing. They struggle to find a completeness in anything. And because of that, they reach out and they harm others. We as a culture, as a people, as humans, resist death as long as we possibly can, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying in this instance resisting death is a bad thing. I don't want to die. I'm looking forward to the reward on the other side, but I don't want my loved ones to die. We don't want to experience that, so we do what we can. We take every precaution we can possibly find, and we should. Nothing wrong with that, but at the end of the day, unless God comes back, we all will experience death. And while it's sad, it is a part of God's plan. Where sin entered into the world, death was the result. But even in worship, even in religion, even in what people value, it seems to be that those without souls, those that are not living, the idols of the world, lifeless things become the gods. Money, time, relationships, TVs, jobs, cars, trucks, houses, anything besides God. So people get so wrapped up in all of these other things that they don't notice that they have a soul. And they forget to put importance where it is. So when that happens, life becomes a culture of placing importance in all the wrong places. You turn on the news today, you see it. You open a newspaper today and you see it. You open a Facebook and there's a real good chance you're going to see it. People are putting value where value does not belong. And they're dying in the process. Physically and spiritually. I want to look at that today. It is not a new thought. We see it today. We experience it today. But if you look at life in Elisha's world, what do you see? Well, King Ahab is there. In 1 Kings chapter 16, we know that Ahab was not a good guy. We know that where kings are concerned, and Ahab the son of Omri did evil in the sight of the Lord more than all who were before him. More than all who were before him. That's bad. I mean, that is, if you think about all the things that have happened up to 1 Kings here, that's not the comparison you want God to make about you. That you were more evil than anybody else that had ever walked. That you did more evil in His sight than all of the others. That you led your people that far away. And as it had been a light thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, he took his wife Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, and went and served Baal and worshipped him. He erected an altar for Baal in the house of Baal, which he built in Samaria. And Ahab made the Asherah. Ahab did more to provoke the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger than all of the kings of Israel who were before him. That's where we see Elisha starting to enter into the picture. We see a king that is pushing God as hard as he can. We see a government in place that is pushing back on the Lord and saying, I don't want you. I want this idol. I want something that is lifeless. I want something that I control. I want to be in charge. So in 1 Kings chapter 17, Elijah prophesies that there's going to be a 3-year drought in the land, and there is. For 3 years, rain does not fall. So you have a king that is worshiping idols. You have a king that's leading the people away. You have a king that's provoking God. And then you have this drought in the land, so that all of a sudden the food and the water and the things that are going to sustain life is not there. So there's death in the land. There's death of people. There's death of plants. There's death of everything all around. And if that's not bad enough, in 1 Kings chapter 18, we now see that the innocents are going to be killed again. The prophets, the ones that are doing God's will, are going to be hunted down, and they are going to be killed. We see Elijah take a stand there in verse 20 of chapter 18 and stand up against the prophets of Baal and say that I am going to show you that God exists. You are going to know. You are going to understand. And Elijah came near to all the people and said, how long will you go limping between two different opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal, then follow him. And the people did not answer him a word. He said, you got a choice to make today. You've got a decision to make today. I'm going to make you make this decision. Are you going to serve the dead? Are you going to serve Baal, a lifeless statue over here, somebody or something that has no purpose, or are you going to serve God? He said you can't continue to go back and forth. You can't continue to limp between the two. And they don't like it. The king doesn't like it. The queen doesn't like it. Nobody likes it. So they're going to hunt down the prophets of God. They're going to kill the prophets of God, to a point where Elijah, who is standing here so boldly at this time and declaring that you will decide and that I am going to serve God, is hiding later on in a cave saying, God, I'm the only one left. Why have you done this to me? In fear for his life. And then we get to the story in 1 Kings chapter 22 and in 2 Kings chapter 1 that we looked at last week, where Ahab wants to do something. He wants to go and he wants to take back what he thinks is his. Ramoth Gilead belongs to us. All we got to do is go and take it. But I don't want to ask God's opinion. I don't want to ask the prophet's opinion, because he never speaks kindly about me. He never prophesies good about me. prophesizes. I just made up a word. He never speaks highly of me. He never prophesies things that are going to be good. He delivers the truth, and I don't like it. So I'm going to push him away. I'm going to go do what I want anyway, and more death comes of it. He dies and his son dies because they don't want to hear what God has to say in the matter. That is what's going on. I mean, you turn on the news today and there's some bad stuff out there going on. But it's not what we see here. I mean, it's no worse than this. I have yet to see in our country people going out and killing the prophets of God, and that being directed by the government. Now, could it get there? Possibly. But that is literally what's going on at this point. That is literally where Elisha is going to come into the scene here. But in the midst of all this ugliness, in the midst of all this death, in the midst of all this what could be looked at as depressing, and it had to be. I mean, at times you would have to struggle even as a believer to maintain a positive outlook on this life if you're living in this time. There's a beautiful story here in 2 Kings chapter 4. Turn with me there, starting in verse 8. One day Elisha went on to Shunem, where a wealthy woman who lived urged him to eat some food. So whenever he passed that way, he would turn in there to eat food. And she said to her husband, "Behold now, I know that this is a holy man of God who is continually passing our way. Let us make a small room on the roof with walls and put there for him a bed and a table and a chair and a lamp, so that whenever he comes to us, he can go in there." This lady recognizes this is a prophet of God, that this is somebody that God is sending her way. So number one, I'm going to feed him. I'm going to take him in. But I'm going to go a step further. I'm going to make sure, I'm going to go to my husband. I'm going to say, "Hey, look, this is what we're going to do. We are going to make him a room in our house so that he spends more time here. So I can spend more time in the presence of a godly man. The world is dead outside. There's nothing that is going on that's real appealing. I'm going to take the good in. I'm going to expose myself to the good. I'm going to expose myself to God. I am going to cling to that." One day he came there, he turned in the chamber and rested there, and he said to Giza, his servant, "Call the Shunammite." When he had called her, he stood before her, and he said to him, "Say now to her, see, you have taken all the trouble for us. What is to be done for you? Would you have a word spoken on your behalf to the king or the commander of the army?" So Elisha says, "Look, you're treating us well. What can we do for you? Do we need to go talk to the king? Do we need to go talk to the head of the army? Do we need to put in a good word so that they don't persecute you on our account?" She said, "No, I dwell among my own people. I'm safe. I'm okay." And he said, "Then what can be done for her?" Gehazi answered, "Well, she has no son and her husband is old." He said, "Call her." And when he called her, he stood in the doorway and he said, "At this season, about this time next year, you shall embrace a son." And she said, "No, my lord, O man of God, do not lie to your servant." But the woman conceived, and she bore a son about that time the following spring, as Elisha had said to her. What a beautiful story. She has invited the presence of the Lord into her life. She said, "I know who God is. I know what a godly man looks like. I want to spend time around him. I don't want to spend time with the spiritually dead out there. I don't want to spend time with ones who have nothing to offer me spiritually. I want to be near to a man of God." And because of that, she's given a gift of life. She is given a son when she thought she couldn't have one. She is given the opportunity to provide for her in her old age, because her husband's not going to be there forever, for the family name to be carried on, for her to have companionship and be blessed in a way that she thought she wasn't going to be able to. To the point where she said, "Don't lie to me. I'm old. I get it. I know that." She's not begging for a child here. In fact, when asked, "What can I do for you?" she said, "I'm good. You don't owe me a thing. Just come and spend time with me. That's what I want. I want to spend time with the prophet of God." You just keep stopping by here. I'll keep feeding you. We'll keep talking. I'll keep growing. She had her priorities in line. She understood. Now we see a part of the story that is sad but beautiful all the same. And I'm not going to read all of verses 18 through 37 here, but I do ask that you read it when you get a chance this afternoon. Turn to it and make sure that what I'm saying is there, and make sure that you read it with your own eyes and you understand how beautiful this story is. Her son goes out into the field to work with Dad. Complains of his head hurting. So he gets a servant, he has him picked up, taken home. The kid sits on Mom's lap and the kid dies. It's terrible. She hadn't asked for a child. And yet all of a sudden she is blessed by this child. She thinks everything is good. And then this blessing of life is being taken from her unexpectedly. Her reaction is not what I would expect. My expectation, because she lives in a world of death, where we live in a world of death, where we live in a world of mourning, our first action, first thought would probably be to mourn. Woe is me. I've lost a child. How can this be? What's happened? And to grieve. Perfectly normal reaction. But that's not her reaction. Her reaction is, go saddle up an animal. We're going to the man of God. He brought this blessing to me through God. I'm going back to Him. So when she goes, you see that Elisha sees her coming near, and he sends out his servant to ask her if everything is well. Is everything okay with your husband? Is everything okay with your son? Is everything okay with you? And what's her answer? Everything's good. Everything's fine. She said, all is well. In verse 23. So when asked first by her husband what's going on, she says, all's well, everything's good. Go saddle the donkey, we're going anyway. And then in verse 26, verse 26. Ronit wants to meet him and say, is all well with you? Is all well with your husband? Is all well with your child? And she answered, all is well. She's looking at life. She's looking at the blessing of life. And she's looking to a man that she knows has the answer. But it does not stop there. Elisha says, okay, I want you and the servant to go on ahead, lay my staff on your son's head, and everything will be fine. She says, no, you can send him. I'm staying with you. You're a man of God. I know that you speak for God. I know that you're a man of God. I will not leave you. Verse 29, he said to Gehazi, tie up your garment and take my staff in your hand and go. And if you meet anyone, do not greet him. If anyone greets you, do not reply. And lay my staff on the face of the child. Then the mother of the child said, as the Lord lives and you yourself live, I will not leave you. So he arose and followed her. The servant went on ahead, laid the staff on the boy's head. Nothing happened. The boy remained the same. He's dead. But then we see Elisha come. Man of God. His presence brings warmth to the boy. We see him lay down on him. We see him share that. We see life breathed back into him. And as such, we see life breathed back into the mother. Her spirit is healed. She has stayed strong throughout all this. She knows that everything is good. Verse 37, she came and fell at his feet, bowing to the ground. Then she picked up her son and went out. That's a beautiful story. That's a story that the world needs to hear. That's a story that the world needs to see through us. That's a story that we need to live each and every day. The world is dying around us, spiritually speaking, some physically speaking. But God came in the flesh to give life to us. He gave His body on a cross to give life to us. What He asks from us is to cling to Him. Don't cling to the death of the world. Don't cling to the depression of the world. Don't cling to all that is wrong in the world. We're going to hurt at times. But Christ says, cling to me. Come unto me, all ye who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. That's what He says. He said, take up your cross and follow me. He said there's going to be pain, there's going to be struggle, there's going to be heartache. But He said, I need my people, the ones that are called by my name, to bring life to the people of the world. To show them that there is life in Christ. To show them that while physical death happens, spiritual death does not have to. We can live forever in the presence of God. All it requires is clinging to Him. All it requires is exactly what this Shunammite woman understood, that I need to be in the presence of God. Elisha was the closest she could find. He was, in her life, as close as she was going to get to God. So she knew that's where she needed to be. She knew that's what was important. She knew that was what was going to sustain her and give her life. How beautiful is that? And how can that very thought change the world? The world's full of death. People dying physically, people dying spiritually. But God says, I've come that you may have life and that you may have it more abundantly. He said, all it takes is understanding that I am the giver of life. All that death, that was brought about by Satan. That was brought about by sin. That was brought about by rejecting God. He said, you cling to me and you will have life. You may die on this earth, but you'll live again. Your body may pass away, but your soul will live forever in my presence. But it requires clinging to Him. It requires understanding that sin has entered into the world and it has entered into each and every one of our lives. That's why we see death. And as such, the only answer is returning to Christ, returning to God. Acknowledging that we are sinful, acknowledging that we need help, and acknowledging that that only comes through submission to Christ. We see the Shunammite at the feet of a godly man. That's where we've got to be, at the feet of Christ, at the foot of His cross. Christ, I've sinned. God, I've sinned. Take that sin from me. That sin is removed when we place ourselves into submission to Him in that watery grave. Being baptized into Christ. And rising again. Continuing to cling to God. Continuing to hold fast to Him. Hold fast to His promises. Hold fast to His teachings. And continuing to go out and show the world that God has made us alive. The world may look dead, the world may be dying, but God has made us alive. That's the message. We're alive in Christ. We're alive in a dead world. If you need to put on Christ in baptism, if you need the prayers of the church, if you need to sit down and study, if you want to look at this story a little bit further, if you don't understand what's going on, let's sit and talk. Let's address these needs. Let's baptize you today. Whatever your needs are, we can sit down together and figure out how they need to be addressed. But let's do it now as we stand and sing.